here.
Not everyone finds what they're passionate about at a young age. All Toby Rzepka knew was that he liked working with his hands and manipulating sounds.
I've done a lot of, in my early career, sort of experimental musical instruments.
The more Toby experimented and traveled, the more he was drawn to a career as a luthier, one who builds guitars.
I got really lucky because when I first became interested in doing this professionally, I took one class. I was in Boston at the time, and this was at the museum school at the Museum of Fine Arts. And the professor of that class introduced me to a guitar maker who I became friends with. And then I think the very next year or 2 years later, he called me up and said, "Hey, I really could use a hand in the shop. Do you want to come work for me?"
Apprenticing in a shop on Cape Cod, Toby's passion grew. He's now been creating custom classical guitars in his own shop in Portland for more than a decade, still working to manipulate sound.
There's no codified sort of classical guitar design that is considered like the norm. And people are always trying new things. And it's an instrument that a lot of people consider it's still developing. So it's an exciting thing to experiment with.
From sound to touch to look, Toby takes his time with each piece, creating everything with basic tools and his hands.
I try to take a somewhat controlled approach. So I try to experiment with one variable at a time. If I'm going to say, okay, what would double sides or laminated sides do for my sound? I'm not going to change anything else about my design for that guitar. So I can try to actually isolate that variable. Even though that's painful because there's so many things I want to try, and it's like, oh, this is going so slowly. Just pop this over here somewhere.
A lot of the experiments come down to materials, including where or how the wood is sourced. Have you ever heard of a moon spruce? Well, it's rare, and according to some forums, is harvested once a year at midnight during the spring equinox and makes a mean guitar.
Endless debates about wood and aging wood. What does aging wood do? You can treat it with different, you can soak it in stuff. There's, woods that have been at the bottom of a lake for hundreds of years, and some of the minerals have been sort of replaced or embedded from the minerals in the lake. And did the spruce that Strad used and the Cremonese violin makers, was it extra good because they stored it in barns with animal urine in it, or floated down the Po River for months and picked up mineral content from the river? And it's just, there's so many ideas. We use a lot of tropical hardwoods from all over the world. So some of my guitars end up having wood from almost every continent. Not Antarctica yet. I haven't made a guitar with wood from Antarctica. But it's
next on the list.
Yeah, right, exactly. You have to figure out how to grow a tree down there, and then we can harvest it.
And just as the wood Toby uses comes from all over, the guitars he makes end up in the hands of musicians all around the world. And that, he says, is when his instruments really come to life.
It's nice to get a little credit here and there, but mainly I like being in the background and letting the musician not have to think about, ideally they're just, connecting with the instrument and allowing them to express their musical ideas.
Ask Toby how long it takes him to make one of his guitars, and he'll say he hasn't given it much thought. He does make about 10 a year, but takes a good chunk of the summer off to enjoy the beauty of Maine.
It's just me in the shop, which I like, and I like a lot of those hand tool steps.
Do you listen to classical guitar, or do you listen to any other music when you're creating in here?
Yeah. I spend a lot of time in this workshop. So if I just listened to classical guitar, I would go insane.
So what do you listen to?
I listen to a wide variety of different stuff. I listen to everything from, dub reggae, classical guitar. I listen to the whole gamut of what people call classical or art music. I listen to jazz. Really, it's almost like what don't I listen to maybe more. And I have two kids who are 6 and 10 now, so they're starting to be more aware of what's popular now, which I'm an old man, so.
So they tell you what's cool.
They tell me what's cool, yeah.
Right.
There are those who would say what Toby Rzepka does for a living is very cool. A man who handcrafts the instruments that inspire new music every day.
Anytime I see one of my guitars played, wherever in the world it is, it makes me really happy.